Hi guys, in this video we're looking at a mock test from Chilwell Driving Test Centre. Now on this particular video we're starting just a little up the road from the test centre in Edinburgh. That's because the examiners don't particularly like us being in and out of the test centre during the test times, so we don't interfere with people actually on the test. So I'll point out when we pass the test centre and we'll just take it from here anyway. So let's see how this pupil does. As we come down this road, we've got a few parked cars and the bend, of course. We want to be very cautious of approaching this in the sense that if there's an oncoming car, we're going to be in the path of that oncoming car as we go around these parked vehicles. The pupil does a really nice job here, covering his mirrors frequently and just holding back there to let the other car through. Can't fault the guy at all for this. And then at the traffic lights at the end of the road, we're going to turn left. That puts us on the main road which leads up to Chilwell past the test centre. As we are waiting at the traffic lights here, it's important to remember not to zone in on the traffic lights too much or to zone out on them completely. You want to be aware of the traffic lights and them changing, and we also want to be aware of the surrounding situation, such as when the lights change, if there's vehicles still coming through from the right, maybe a blue light vehicle or push bike, or anything coming up behind that could squeeze around, such as a push bike or motorbike. As the pupil comes out here, he takes up the left-hand position, which is absolutely spot on. Note the arrows on the right there telling everyone to merge in, so it's really important to watch those mirrors if there's the potential for someone to be there. And the pupil again does a really nice job just getting up to speed as we head up into Chilwell. This next set of traffic lights is where you'll come out for your test from Chilwell Test Centre. So just on the left is Eldon Road. To get to the test centre, we'd turn down there, and on your right there's a driveway into the office blocks, and you'll be able to see where the test centre is and how to get into there in some of my other videos. When we're approaching traffic light junctions, if they've been green for a while, my advice is always to cover the brake for a few seconds up until you reach the point of no return where you're no longer safe to stop. Now, my pupil unfortunately keeps his toe over the accelerator even though the lights have been green for a long time. As a result, he doesn't have the time to cover the brake and stop when those lights change. However, he could have had he been more prepared for that. It was very borderline, so I'm going to put down a driver fault. If we'd have been any further back, I'd have expected a stop, and I may have intervened as a result of that. So be very mindful as you approach those traffic lights. If they've been green a while, prepare for them to change, and just avoid yourself getting caught out by the lights changing unexpectedly. As we approach the next traffic lights, we'll be taking a right turn, and as we get nearer, you'll see it opens out into two lanes, and then we've got the separate filter light for the right turn and straight ahead. So just be mindful of that. Make sure you check your mirrors and take up your position nice and early, and then obey the light that applies to you. Be very careful of looking at the wrong traffic light. As you can see here, the left-hand lane can continue, the right-hand lane has only just changed to continue. So if the left light changes and you're sat on the right, be mindful you don't get caught out by that light changing. Also, be really mindful of your left hand side as you make this turn. It's very easy to lean away from the turn before going into it, and as a result you can compromise the traffic on the left by not allowing them enough room. Up ahead we do experience quite a lot of traffic, so I am going to speed the camera up a little bit just to get through a lot of this. While we're doing that, just keep an eye on the space that the pupil keeps behind each vehicle. There's always plenty of room behind the cars when we stop, and the pupil is regularly on his mirrors as well, keeping an eye out for bikes coming up behind. So it's a really good example of how to follow traffic. Like I said, I'm just going to speed it up because we're sat in it for quite a while. There's no point you sat staring at the back of a Honda for the next 10 minutes. Now, if you do find yourself in traffic like this, Don't let yourself get stressed or worked up about it. Just sit back, relax, and go with the flow. Even if your test takes a little bit longer as a result of the traffic, you can't make any mistakes while you're sat still. Just keep a good following space, make sure you're aware of your surroundings, and make good progress when you can. And that's all you need to do, is just show the examiner you can keep yourself safe and under control in those situations. As we come through this next traffic light, just a word of caution here. Notice how the far side of the junction we've got traffic queuing up. Before you cross over a junction like this, you'll want to be sure you can get to the other side without obstructing the other traffic. So my pupil just about gets away with that one there, and the traffic doesn't sit there for very long at all, so I didn't think it was enough of a risk to mark a fault, particularly because he's far enough forward that the cars behind aren't going to be obstructed in any way from crossing the junction. So just something to be mindful of when you're crossing traffic light junctions. Make sure you can get fully across and you don't cause a problem to the vehicles behind. As you can see from the situation here, we've got a lot of oncoming traffic, a lot of school kids on the roadside, so we want to be very mindful of that as we make our way up the hill. The pupil demonstrates very good awareness of the risk involved by holding himself back at about 26 miles an hour up this hill, which is absolutely spot on for the circumstances. So just be mindful that your speed accounts for the situation. The busier it is, the slower you want to be going, and that gives you more time to look around and assess the risks involved. As the road ahead opens up, there are signposts directing you into the lanes depending on where you're going. Now we're going for Stapleford, which is the middle lane as we go forward. The left lane is marked as Derby only, and the right hand lane, which is a filter you'll see here on the right anyway, takes us into the tram stop. So for Stapleford and for Nottingham, take up this position like my pupil has, and the aim is use your mirrors and position early so everyone knows what you're doing in good time and you're not having to then change position as you move along towards the roundabout ahead. Then the roundabout ahead is Bardill's Island, and as we're going up, we're going to see the sign on the left mapping out how to get to Stapleford. In particular, we'd be looking at Stapleford B6003, because off to the right where it says Nottingham A52, it also says Stapleford for goods vehicles. Now we're not in a goods vehicle, so we're going to ignore that and focus on Stapleford B6003. Notice the markings as we approach guide us into lane 3. Now when you approach roundabouts like this, we have the traffic lights to help us, of course. Now we still want to be looking around for people who may not be following the traffic lights as they should, blue light vehicles, cyclists, or just people who are being a bit inattentive or a bit hasty to get through the junction. As we make our way through then, we look ahead for our markings, focus on our exit, which we know is straight ahead second exit, and we follow our lane around to our exit. As we're doing that, it's important to keep an eye on the mirrors too, so we know who's around us and what the cars next to us are doing. On the left of us, 2 lanes with the blue car and the Jeep are going to go left only towards Derby. However, occasionally people will cut in from the Jeep's position into our lane, and sometimes you get people doing the opposite, the Nissan potentially going left towards Derby from this lane. So just be mindful of people making mistakes, keep your mirrors covered, and try to stagger your position so you're not directly alongside anybody, particularly as you come around towards a exit. As we leave the roundabout, notice the 30 mile an hour sign on the left and the slow markings. Of course, there's a lot going on here, so we don't want to be traveling at 30 mile an hour. You notice my pupils sitting around the 20 mile an hour mark, which is absolutely perfect. We've got the crossing. You see the pedestrians on the left there approaching it. They could change quite quickly as the pedestrians push the button, or the car on the left there just starting to stick his nose out as well. So just making our way along here with a little bit of caution, keeping the speed nice and steady, not getting up to that 30 mile an hour until we've got a bit more room. You see the pupil creeping up now, 26 mile an hour there, just picking up his speed again as we get more view of the road ahead. We've got more warnings about schools up ahead here. We've got the traffic light on red as people are using the crossing. We've also got some roadworks here. So again, a lot going on, and you can see the pupil bringing his speed down in good time to join onto that queue. The warning on the left there telling you there's temporary lights ahead. Roadworks, of course, which means the road's going to be laid out differently to what we would probably expect it to normally look like. As I mentioned earlier about sitting in traffic, don't let yourself get worked up about it. Just sit back and enjoy that little bit of respite you get from moving around. You can't really do much wrong when you're sat still, so use it as a point to breathe and to reset your mind so you can focus forward on what you're doing next. And a key point when you're doing your test as well, don't think about the mistakes you may have made, because you may not even have been marked for them. If the examiner's got something to say, they'll tell you at the end. If you get yourself worked up and distracted about what you've done previous to this, then it's just going to distract you from what you're doing next, and that's where the faults are really going to creep in. Just a note there that the light isn't actually flashing and faulty, that's just the way that cameras pick up LED lights. You'll notice that with some cars as well, that the headlights seem to be flashing sometimes when it's actually just the way the cameras pick it up, because they operate at different frequencies. It does get quite narrow down here as well, and you can see the verge on the left. We've got a bit of stone wall in there as well. Again, just keep your speed nice and steady. If you're sitting around 26 miles an hour, that's perfect here. 30 is probably a little bit too quick, but 20 is probably a little bit too slow. As we come up into Stapleford, we've got a traffic light junction. There is a filter lane for turning left, and you'll see the give way for that up ahead. We're going to follow the curve round and go straight across at the traffic lights. You can see the pupils a little cautious about going through the gap. That's absolutely fine. If you're not sure about the space, then you should hold back. But as soon as you do know that you've got space, be positive and get the wheels turning. Notice the zebra crossing there. We've got quite a few people heading towards it. So the rule on these, of course, is let them cross if they show an intention to cross. If you're not sure, it's always best to be on the cautious side as well. So like the lady here as well, she was a bit uncertain. She held back for a moment, and then she's made her way across once she realizes that both sides of the road have stopped for her. Once that crossing's clear, away you go, of course. As we make our way down roads like this, of course, we've got a bit more visibility, but there's still bends, and that kind of limits what we can see going on ahead. This bend catches a few people out because the markings on it are very faded. It does bend round to the left, and as we come round to the left, you'll see some pedestrians on the right who are kind of in the road. So my pupil is quite cautious as he comes up to these, and that's absolutely spot on. I don't think anyone would warrant a fault being recorded there, just because there is an obvious hazard and the pupils responded appropriately to that by holding back with the speed. We've got more warnings about a school zone, and I'm going to get the pupil to pull up on the left at a safe place. You can see he tucks himself right into the curb, gets himself right up to the double yellows, but he's not on them, and that's absolutely perfect. It is quite a busy road, so he's keeping an eye on the mirrors before going as well. The trick here is we don't want to be pulling out as cars approach. We want to make sure that we can get out and move off before anybody catches us. If we pull out and cause them to slow down, that's going to go down as a serious fault, and if we pull out too close to people, it's going to go to a dangerous fault very quickly. Just before pulling away, as always, do check that right shoulder, lean forward, look over your shoulder for anyone in the blind area, and then move off if it's safe, just like the pupil does here. Absolutely flawless. Up ahead we've got quite an awkward stretch of road where there's normally a lot of parked vehicles, and it can get very uncomfortable, particularly if you meet a large vehicle coming the other way. And being a bus route, it's very likely you will come across a large vehicle. If ever you're not sure about the space, the best bet is to tuck in and let the other vehicle pass before you move on again. Just up ahead we've got a mini roundabout where we were going first exit left towards Ilkeston. You can see there's a warning there about the low bridge further along the road, so not something we have to worry about because we're only in a small car. But if you're behind a large vehicle, then it might be worth noting that height restriction, that large vehicle may not fit and that they may have to pull over and turn around at some point, so giving them plenty of room. Of course, I'm going to get my pupil to pull up on the left up ahead. The trick to this again is just picking a safe spot where you're not blocking driveways, giving the vehicles behind plenty of time to react to you pulling over. And the pupil does a really nice job at this. You can see he's at about 26 miles an hour here and just gently brings it down, ready to pull over. He's giving the people behind plenty of time with his signals and is very aware of the mirrors. And as he brings the car in, just pausing right between two driveways, absolutely spot on. Just like before, we're going to let those vehicles pass and then find a safe gap to go. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to do that, and in this particular situation we had a lot of vehicles behind us. Now this is where we can use the oncoming vehicles to help us out. The van coming towards us here means the cars behind cannot overtake. That can create an opening for us to move out in front of whoever's queuing up behind us. However, we have to make sure we do that with firstly confidence, but secondly caution, because if they decide to launch around us as that oncoming vehicle passes, then we're going to have a problem. Pupil does a really nice job here, and he remembers his blind spot as well just before going. So absolutely faultless, even with the added pressure of this being quite a busy road and having quite a lot of cars approaching from behind him. You'll notice the road ahead changes and we get a lot of greenery around us, and this can create the impression that the speed limit has increased. Now unfortunately my pupil gets caught out by this and he accelerates to about 34 miles an hour before he catches himself and brings it back down again. So be very mindful of the change in environment when you're driving around. That the change in environment doesn't necessarily mean a change in speed limits, and keep yourself down below that 30 mile an hour limit, and just keep your eye out for any change of speed limits. You'll normally see repeaters where the speed limit's not 30 in a built-up area, so if it's 20 or 40 for example. Up ahead we're going to be taking a right turn towards Nottingham, and this is quite an awkward junction to handle. So it is a T-junction, but it's on a bend. As you're approaching, it's quite a busy road as well, so you get a lot of traffic, particularly at this time of day where we've got the schools coming out. So it really is a case of just being patient and observant for a gap. As we approach, you can see the sign on the left there. It looks kind of like a right turn and straight ahead, but it is left or right. And you'll see as we get to the top, the give way sign on the left hand side highlighting that. Notice how the pupil is already starting to lean over to the right, keeping near the white line rather than near the curb. This makes it really apparent to the other cars behind that we intend to turn right. He's also got his mirrors covered, he's keeping on the left side because there are vehicles around us, and he is signalling as well. Notice the give way sign. Just sped things up a bit because it was a very, very slow approach to that. I'm going to record a fault here for my pupil's observations. Notice the grey car holds back and invites us out, and I think my pupil was a little bit late at spotting the white BMW, resulting in a little bit of a firm brake as he got to the middle. Now, he didn't actually pull out on him, and he didn't cause a risk that I think was sufficient enough to put a serious fault. He responded to the problem, although it could have been smoother and it could have been sooner. So I'm just going to record that as a driver fault there. As we come ahead, there's quite a few potholes on this road, so you'll notice the pupil doesn't quite get up to 30 mile an hour. He sits more like 26 mile an hour coming around here, and that's absolutely fine as long as you are demonstrating good awareness of what's going on. The road surface, the bends, the oncoming traffic, it all warrants that slightly lowered speed. So rather than 30, like I say, he's sitting about mid-20s here. As we enter a 40 mile an hour zone, of course, I want to see a good mirror check before accelerating up to speed. The pupil does just that. Any change in speed or direction, we should be checking our mirrors before we do it. And that's going to keep us safe because we're more aware of what other vehicles are doing behind us. We can plan them for anyone who might be trying to overtake us, particularly motorcycles who can be very, very quick at picking up their speed. As we come around this next bend, we're going to enter into a 50 mile an hour zone, and again we want to see a little mirror check and plenty of progress up to that speed limit if it's safe. You can see there's a really good view ahead, so there's no problem with getting that speed up, and the pupil does a really good job there, hitting the mid-40s and maintaining that quite well. He's keeping on the mirrors too because we have got cars following us, and again that awareness is really helpful when we're making our way down roads like this, because it could just take one vehicle to decide to overtake, and if you don't see them, you could force them to stay out longer than necessary, or you could end up not being able to avoid a risk they create. The markings here allow our side to overtake as well, whereas the oncoming vehicles can't. So where the solid line is on our side of the road, we can't overtake, and we shouldn't be overtaken as well. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be checking. Keep on those mirrors frequently because not everybody behaves themselves as they should. At these traffic lights, we're going to be taking a right turn. Now there are two right turns. The one that we're going to be taking is a 90 degrees right, which is on Coventry Lane, heading down towards Stapleford. If we go half right, 45 degrees to the right, that's Wallerton Vale. We're going to be very mindful about which turn we're taking. If you do take the wrong one, it's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal if you go the wrong way, as long as it's done safely. I just want to point out as well that no, Nottingham is not haunted. I've just skipped the footage forward because we were sat in this queue for quite a while. As we come into this junction, you'll see those two turns I was on about. The red Mini in front goes for Wallerton Vale, and my pupil goes right onto Coventry Lane. There's quite a few potholes there. You can see the car bounce around a bit. As we go ahead, it does look like quite an open and fast road, and my pupil was a bit unsure about the speed limit until he sees the flashing speed warning on the left telling him 31 is too fast. The pupil corrects himself fairly quickly there, and he hasn't gone significantly over the speed limit, so I'm only going to record a driver fault on that occasion. Notice those 50-mile-an-hour signs and the roadwork signs there as well. We've got some temporary traffic lights up ahead, so even though the speed limit is 50, we might want to consider keeping it around the mid-40s and just be mindful of those lights, particularly if they've been green for a while, because that means they could change. Like I say, if lights have been green a while, expect them to change. Cover your brake as you approach, and then pick a point of no return where you can no longer stop safely before you go back on that accelerator. And that will keep you more safe, more in control, and make you more able to stop smoothly if you need to, which of course is going to serve you well when you pass your test, not just on your test. As we come down into a 30-mile-an-hour zone, we've then got a sign up ahead telling us there's 2 mini roundabouts, one directly in front of us and one off to the right. We're going to be going left towards Derby, so that second one's not going to be a problem to us. As we approach, we want to keep tucked into that left-hand side, mirrors and signal in good time, just checking the cars from the right that we've got a safe opportunity to get out, and also watching the left. If we don't look to the left before we pull out, we could end up accelerating into the back of a queue like this, or having to brake very heavily as we react to that queue. So always look into the road you're going into before committing to it. Just a little way ahead is Bardill's Island, and this seems to get a lot of people flustered. Now the direction we're coming from, we're going to take a right turn third exit towards Derby. This is also signposted as the M1, which you'll see on the markings, and the A52. So knowing those markings, knowing those road numbers is going to be really helpful in picking the right position as you make your way around. Unfortunately for my pupil on this occasion, he doesn't quite manage the lane discipline and ends up getting a dangerous fault. The difference between a dangerous and a serious fault here is just the fact there was a car next to us when this happened. So on the sign, you'll see Derby and the M1 off to the right third exit. As we approach, the pupil is going to take up the middle lane which says M1, and that's absolutely perfect. You could also use the right hand lane as that says M1 as well. As we enter the roundabout, there is a van on the right who almost cuts into our lane and then corrects themselves. The pupil holds back quite nicely for that, just in case they do continue into our lane. And then of course we've got our queue at these lights here. The pupil is lined up perfectly to go round to the right towards Derby and the M1. Now Derby is also signposted as the A52. The road we're going on to is the A52. So what we want to be doing is matching our current position to our exit position. Notice there were 2 lanes for the exit we're following, and we're in the left of them. So as we come around this curve, we want to get in the left-hand lane for the A52. The pupil unfortunately cuts into the second lane and then corrects himself. And this is where the dangerous fault comes in. There was a car on our right and they had to adjust the position to avoid my learner. Now that unfortunately is all it takes for a serious fault to become a dangerous fault, the presence of a vehicle nearby. If the vehicle hadn't been there, that would have just been a serious fault. Even so, it's still a fail on the test because the lane discipline could present a high risk to vehicles nearby. As we make our way down the A52, it is a 70-mile-an-hour road, and you can see the barriers in the middle there separating us from the oncoming car. That allows us to do 70 instead of 60. If the barriers aren't there and you're sharing with oncoming cars, it's going to be 60. We've also got the no stopping sign telling us not to stop on this road, which just seems a bit of common sense anyway. And a little further up, we've got some warnings about queues, and then speed drops to 40. When we get down to the next roundabout, which is Bardill's Island, we're going to be taking the second exit towards Long Eaton. There's that 40 sign, you can see the markings on the road there as well. And then you can see the direction sign for Long Eaton, second exit on the left hand side of the roundabout. The trick to this one is we don't want to be signaling as we go into the roundabout, but we do want to signal to change lane as we get closer to the roundabout. Notice these signs here telling us Long Eaton is the left hand lane only, and that's because it's off to the left hand side. As we get a little further, there's another sign telling you there's 3 lanes, and we're going to move over to that first position, so we have to actively change lane here to the left. I want to see a mirror and signal done here, and the pupil does just that. As we take up that position, the signal needs to go off though. If you keep the left signal on as you enter the roundabout, it tells people you're turning left into the garden centre, and of course if someone's coming out of the garden centre when you do that, they could see your signal and interpret that as you turning and end up pulling out in front of you. So we want to cut off the signal there so we're not misleading people into thinking that. As we make our way into the roundabout, you notice the pupil just keeps in that left-hand position, follows it all the way around through the lights and off the roundabout, and that's absolutely spot on. The markings there as well confirming the road number for Long Eaton, B6003, so we know we're going the correct way. The next set of traffic lights, I'm going to get my pupil to turn left into Toton Tram Stop, and we're going to do our manoeuvre. I'm going to ask him to do a reverse bay park. Toton Tram Stop is a common spot for learners to practice, but also for examiners to bring pupils on their tests. It used to be that your reverse bay would have to be done in the test centre, however that was changed a few years ago, so you could end up doing your reverse bay park in any car park within the test area. So it's good to have a look around and a practice in a variety of car parks, not just near the test centre, but equally places you'll be visiting after you pass your test, because getting on the road isn't just about passing the test, it's about being prepared for what you're doing afterwards. So don't limit yourself to just using particular car parks. Try doing this in a variety of car parks with different layouts and different amounts of space around you in order to better prepare yourself for your driving test and for after the test. As we turn into the tram stop, you may notice these brand new speed ramps, and they are absolutely horrific to drive over. Bring your speed right down to a crawl and bounce over them very, very slowly. If you hit them hard, it's going to potentially damage the car and make it very uncomfortable for you and your examiner when you're on your test. We're going right at the mini roundabout, third exit, and there's another of these speed ramps on each of the exits of the roundabout as you come across it. So again, very slowly, keeping that speed below 5 miles an hour if possible. Whilst my pupil's doing this manoeuvre, he makes a mistake, which I'm going to record as a driver fault for control. I'm also going to speed up the footage because he does take a little bit of time doing this. The fault comes in when the pupil realizes he's not actually reversing into the space he intended, and he has to shuffle across because he's halfway between 2 spaces. Now, if you find yourself in this situation where you're not actually lined up with the space you intended, simply correct it and finish the maneuver within the lines, and you will still pass your test as long as you demonstrate good observations and good control while you're doing that. If you finish outside of the lines with your wheels hanging over into the next space, that will be a serious fault. So don't leave it if it's not in the space fully. As we leave again, just very, very slowly over these speed ramps, and we're going to go left at the traffic light. There is a little bit of confusion here with this car. My pupil was a bit uncertain of what they were doing. It makes the right choice just to wait a moment and see if they're going to move before continuing around them. Whilst this could potentially be seen as hesitation, I think in light of what that car was doing, my pupil made a fair response to sit back and just wait a moment before going round them. There was no gain anyway because we'd end up at the red lights, and there was no one behind us, so there was no delay caused to anyone else too. So I couldn't justify recording a fault on that occasion. Whilst we are sat at traffic lights, it's really good to keep your attention and your concentration up. If we keep aware of the traffic lights and also scanning around for traffic approaching those lights from the sides, then we're more prepared for when the lights change. We can make safe progress, and if anything is going to cause us a problem, then we can spot it early and prepare for it, such as blue lights or cyclists coming through the junction as the lights change. Just a reminder again about speed limits, that we are in a 30 zone. Despite all the greenery that can give us the impression it's faster, we want to be very attentive to that speed. There's no reminders telling us it's different to 30, so it's got to be a 30 zone because we're still in a built-up area. We've just come out of a tram stop, we've got housing ahead of us, and you can see my pupil holding it nice and steady at about 26 or 27 mile an hour, keeping just under that speed limit as we go along. Down this hill, of course, the car can easily pick up, so we want to have our right foot over the brake to hold the car back, particularly when there's a queue ahead here. You can see the pupil again not letting the car get above 26 mile an hour and keeping a good following space on the queue ahead. He never lets the speed pick up, and that's absolutely spot on control for this road. Just up ahead, we're going to be taking a left turn at the traffic lights. Now, before we get there, this lane is going to split into two positions. If we're following the road ahead, you'll see the lines direct us into the right-hand position, and we have to cross the line to get into the left-hand position. That's how you can determine which lane is going to go which way. Crossing the lines means you're changing direction, you're not going straight ahead. Shortly after that, you see the arrows confirming that, so we know we're in the correct place to do our left turn. The turn itself at the traffic lights is quite tight, so we want to make sure you're looking up into the turn and relaxing off that accelerator, just so you can give yourself more time to coordinate the steering as you come around. It seems like quite a wide road as you come into it, but if you look up and ahead, you'll see it's straight back into one position. The extra space is for large vehicles to make that turn, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do it from that position. They'd have to sit in the right-hand lane and obstruct the whole of the road. As we make our way along this road, again, you can see there's quite a lot of traffic coming the other way. The pupil's keeping a good following space on the car in front. You'll notice his speed is about 26 mile an hour there, which is absolutely fine for this road in these conditions. Once you get more room, by all means get yourself right up to 30 mile an hour if it's safe, but don't pressure yourself to get up to 30 if it's not appropriate. When you see pedestrians waiting to cross, or queues like this where you're coming around the bend and you can't really see around that queue, it does make sense to hold yourself back with that speed and keep yourself just under the limit rather than at the limit. You can see the large vehicle up ahead, and of course that creates a big visual barrier. We don't know what's going on behind it. Notice the pupil again holding about 26 mile an hour just to keep that speed slightly under the limit. which gives him a better chance of responding to anything that truck might be hiding behind it. With the slow moving traffic, you can see the pupil's keeping a good following space on the vehicle in front again. He's not getting right up to the bumper, he's not letting them move away and creating a huge gap either. It's just a comfortable following space, and this is absolutely perfect. Just up ahead, we've got a roundabout where we're going straight ahead. As we come up to that roundabout, you'll notice the white arrows surrounding it on that lowered curb. Now that isn't for you to drive on. We want to keep completely clear of that as we go around, and just like the vehicle in front does, you'll see he goes around those markings and stays off of that low curb. It's not for us, it's for large vehicles if they need it, so keep yourself out of that area. We've then got a number of speed ramps along this road, and you'll notice my pupil keeping his speed nice and low. I always encourage them to hit these at about 10 miles an hour, at least under 15, and that's going to keep it more comfortable for the examiner and yourself, and it's going to reduce the odds of you doing any harm to your car. Hitting speed ramps too fast is going to put your suspension out, put your tracking out, or potentially damage your tyres, and of course we don't want to be doing that. I don't want you doing it to my car, and of course you won't want to do it to your own car when you pass your test. So if you get into good habits, keeping that speed down as you go over those speed ramps, that's going to keep your car in better condition for longer, meaning you have less expenses and less time off the road with breakdowns and mechanical problems. At the roundabout, we're going to turn right, then left at the traffic lights. Notice again these white arrows and the lowered curb, and how the pupil comes around staying off of that low curb. That's absolutely spot on. As we come off, we've then got two lanes. You'll notice the left lane is left only and the right lane for straight and right. So you have to know where you're going and get straight into position. If you're going from this roundabout into the test centre, you'd want that right hand lane and straight across at the lights to turn right then into the driveway of the test centre. With the left lane being isolated like this, it usually means we've got a filter light. You can see that up ahead now, that the cars on the left can take the turn, while the cars on the right, going straight and right, are not allowed to, because the other traffic from our left side you can see still flowing through the junction. We're going to be taking a right turn up by this white house. It's quite a tight turn. We've got a filter box to use, so we want to get all four wheels into that filter lane if we need to wait for oncoming cars. You can see the pupil does quite a nice job of that. He's slightly off to the left, but not enough to cause a problem to anyone, so I'm not going to mark a fault there. And then when we make the turn, this one in particular is quite tight. Be very, very mindful of oncoming traffic. You see how my pupil held back there quite nicely, and that's absolutely spot on. Slow and steady where the space is limited. I'm going to come around the bend, and I'm going to get my pupil to do an angle start before we finish up. So just around this bend, we'll see a black car pulled up on the left. Now the angle start is where the examiner will ask you to pull up behind a vehicle about a car length away. They'll specifically say not to worry about any driveways in this situation because they don't care about that. They're interested in seeing how you maneuver around that parked car. So as we pull up, you can see my pupil getting fairly close to the car, just being mindful of the bush there sticking out that he doesn't get too close to it. And then he's going to move around this black car. What the examiners want is a slow, controlled move, so we don't cause any risks to ourselves as we pass that car. Plenty of clearance on it, progress as we get around it as well, But of course, lots of observations on that right side, and especially that right blind spot before we move out. At the end of the road, we're going to be taking a left turn. The view on this one's quite poor as well, so you can see the pupil going quite slowly as we get to the turn, and then we're going to pull up on the left where we started, and that's the end of that test route. So 5 faults and sadly 1 dangerous fault for this pupil. A fantastic drive, just that 1 mistake on Bramcat Island. I do hope this video has been helpful for you, and if it has, please do like, share and subscribe, and I'll keep trying to put more of these videos out. Thank you ever so much for watching, and God bless you.